Good morning. So let us begin. I wanted to use some of the time today to set some actions from the retro. So these are kind of going to be proposed actions because we haven't got the entire team here, but I've deliberately chosen this version of Delivery Weekly since we already have comments from Myra and Skarbek. So we kind of get a little bit of cover from the America side as well. So thank you for adding your comment as well, Henry. Firstly, was there any additional stuff that anyone wanted to call out in terms of like stuff that they felt particularly happy about in Q4? In fact, let's start there. Like, was there anything anyone wants to call out on like things they were, additional things they liked for Q4?
Maybe it sounds obvious, but I think it's really impressive that we each month deliver our release and are delivering our software daily with high frequency. I mean, this is really one of the main targets of our team, right? And I think we really are exceptional at this, besides all of the obstacles that we have in the way often. So I think this is really, even if it might be like we are used to doing this all the time, but I think it's really exceptional to have this.
Yeah, thanks for calling that out. It's absolutely true. And MTTP at the moment is looking phenomenal, and that's down to release managers, setting up a schedule and reacting and doing things, and everyone who's contributed to the tooling, and also the dev migration, right? So it's like full team effort for sure. And then in terms of like setting some action, so I am aware that we're all a little too busy and we have lots of things going on right now, and we have lots of things that we want to do in Q1. So I don't want to set an action that's going to increase that burden, right? Like, but at the same time, I think it would be worth us taking one or maybe two reasonable sized actions that we can take to just try and make this quarter a little bit smoother, less stressful, or more enjoyable, or whatever it is compared to the previous one. So there are some ideas already on the issue, but I wonder, does anyone have any ideas of either an action you'd like to take or something that you would like to see change in some way? Either we do more of or we do less of in this quarter.
I've got,
go ahead.
Sorry. Okay, I've got 3.
Great.
We can pick and choose if it's too much for
Yeah,
one
let's
quarter.
go for it.
So this is similar to what I discussed with Amy in the one-on-one. One is automating the process to deploy an MR using the pick into auto deploy flag label, but that's only when we do the dance of turning on the feature flag and all that stuff. The second is to automate the posting of that table that we manually create currently in the security release issue. And the third is to make it possible for ChatOps to trigger a release tools pipeline instead of a deployer pipeline. I'll add the links into the notes as well.
Awesome, thanks, Ruben. And Henry, was it you who was talking at the same time? Like, did you have ideas?
Yeah, just for an action which probably isn't a lot of work, so we can probably just do it right away. One of my suggestions was to as release managers have a look that we don't too often, manage incidents and then are the DIs for them. We just talked about this in the last delivery meeting also. And I think if we would find the right places to update the process of how to deal with incidents and make it clear everywhere where we might be missing it. I need to check where it is, but I think we have a lot of documentation around incident management and stuff, but I'm not always looking at it. So I think maybe just some documentation updates, if needed, could help here.
For us, do you mean, or for engineering call?
For both sides, right? For us, but also for the infra department, so that we all are on the same side. How do we define DIs for incidents and drive them to a resolution, right? Because I don't think that everybody has the same side on that.
I agree. So it is in the handbook. It's a little bit blurry, and I know I've talked to some of you around this, but I think you're right. There is some action on our side. So I think it would be a great one for us to.
Yeah, I could just open an issue for that and then go through the documentation that we have, try to figure out what needs to be clarified, and then make a proposal on certain places, I guess.
I would like us to try and do a less hands-on version of that, just because I know we're super busy and we do have other things. So the handbook I've just mentioned there, like included there, has it says, at the point the engineer on call is engaged in the incident, they are the DRI. Now, what we're seeing at the moment for various reasons, and one of the biggest ones is because of Woodhouse not having the link anymore to email addresses, is that things are not getting assigned. So I think the action we probably need to take on our side is, when we end up holding an incident that is not like release tools, it is not like something that we own, it's like an incident that needs an investigation. I think we need to be very active about saying, hey, engineer on call, can you take this as DRI, and actually be explicit on that and make sure we set that on the issue, right? So that's probably the one that would be good for us to document. We do have a run book in the release tools, like a release manager guide to incidents. So maybe that would be a good place for us to do it. And then at that point, what we're doing is eliminating the nobody's sure. What we're creating then is a situation where we either get a yes or a no. And depending on whether they are yeses or nos, we can start to figure out what the problem is. Some of them will be nos, and I think they'll be nos for great reasons, like there are too many incidents, or I don't know how to deal with this, and then we can figure out how to solve those.
Yeah, I think the most problematic thing is to delegate, right? How to figure out to whom to delegate in certain situations. Let's say, for instance, we have QA failures in staging, then we would open an incident, and this is something which probably needs to investigation by QA at this point, right? So usually we are the ones who are going there trying to find the right person, because we mostly deal with this and we feel like we are the experts for these kind of incidents. But that takes then a lot of time for us and we are practically the DRI, right? And in this situation, I think it would still be worthy to consider if we can hand this over to somebody else to drive it, right? And if it's the EOC, then we could at least start with the EOC. And if EOC doesn't know how the process works, which probably is true in most cases, they need to find someone who knows what to do or look into that and then drive it forward. And there the problem starts, right? If they don't know, then who is taking over then? And then we again have the problem of how do we delegate? And this is, I think, I don't know, an organizational and also a knowledge problem.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely agreed. Yeah. Let's review our guide and see where we go there. And I think all of the people we need to use have rotations. So we don't need to go and find the right person so much as like we do for quality, because you have to go and look up who's on call, but there is always a quality on call. And if we can't find one, we can escalate to the quality managers. There's always an engineer on call. If we can't find one, we escalate to the IMOC, and there's a dev escalation. And if we can't find a dev escalation, that automatically escalates up to the engineering managers. So I think we need to like, let's review, like, that's a great action. Let's review our incident management guidelines on our side and make sure we all have a kind of shared understanding. Like, there definitely are going to be some improvements that need to come from here. There's quite a lot of things going on.
Yeah. I guess just getting used to delegate instead of trying to cut things short because we feel like we can, because we know how it works, to help with that, right? That often would help probably, and then we would also train other people at the same time, and that it would improve it for everybody else in the long term.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right.
We've had a lot of incidents. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, we've had a lot of incidents too, where it's delivery, like QA jobs are failing, which is the canary to like an infrastructure problem, right? And it's like you lodge an incident saying QA tests are failing, and it's like, I understand from, especially in the EOC side, like it's hard to really jump in and feel like that's just could be tests failing, but you know, it's just so happens that it's test failing, which holds us up, and it's turns out that it's an infrastructure issue. Yeah, it's hard. Like, we need to get better.
We do. Yeah, I intend to go through the delivery blocker stuff this morning, and take a closer look and pull some numbers on recent stuff, because there are conversations going on around staging and how we can improve kind of ownership and how we can make it easier to debug. But actually, what I want to see is the root cause, because actually, I think recently, I'm not sure if I've seen any software change failures failing those tests. I've seen a lot of config changes from various teams, I think, including us. But you know, that's an interesting workflow that we're failing a deployment. We're asking quality to debug, and then it's coming right back around to infra. So I'm going to pull those things out this morning and see what we can do. But for now, let's take an action, a small action, and then hopefully it's not super overwhelming, that we, Henry, maybe review the, actually no, Ahmad, as release manager, would you like to review the release manager incident guide, check it matches with your understanding of what we're sort of expecting, and then for the next quarter, I think we all try and hold each other accountable. So when you're a release manager or when you're involved around incidents, let us refine our process so that we're not always left with holding the incidents. And then that's maybe a manageable action for us all. Okay, great. So how about we set 2 actions for this quarter then based on the Q4 retro. One is to make at least two improvements to release tooling to reduce toil. So Ruben, I know you've got some suggestions there. I think Robert's opened a couple as well, but we make sure we get at least 2 of those prioritized. Plus, we review the release manager incident guide and start proactively, like helping spread knowledge so that we're not the only incident resolvers. Does that sound like useful, but not overwhelming? That's what I'm aiming at here. Great. 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 Unless there's anyone else wants to say anything about retros or actions or improvements, then no. Great. Over to you.
Sure. Just quick note that for those of you who haven't been following closely with the pipeline reorder, we're basically looking like we're going to try and do it sometime next week. Actual timings and dates to be decided. The current thinking is we will kick off the change with the 2100 UTC auto deploy for a specific day, simply because that'll be kind of at the start of Myra's day, and then I come online directly after her, and both of us two have had the most involvement in the project. So like we will be watching those first few pipelines the closest. So yeah, if you obviously, any questions and concerns, let us know. For those of you who are release managers and following auto deploys, just at least familiarize yourself with the new layout. It's a lot simpler than it really looks. Like, it's really just changing the order of things around, right? Like that. At the end of the day, that's what it is. There's no reason why deployments should fail or anything. We may have some teething problems if we haven't set up our GitLab CI file dependencies exactly right, but I'm pretty sure we'll iron them out quickly. Thinking back and reflecting on this week, though, it has got a very interesting ramification in that the incidents a subset of the incidents we have had is when we've been deploying to staging. And so in the new pipeline model, we would have gone to staging canary, which would have been fine. We would have gone to production canary, which would have been fine. We would have had baking time, and then there would have been a manual promote to deploy to both staging and production. We would have gotten held up by these big incidents in production, and therefore been running production canary and staging canary on a newer version. To be clear, I don't think this is an issue. It just means that production canary, for example, is baking one release for like a day instead of, say, an hour before production is upgraded. So I don't think it's an issue, but it's just another point we should also consider when reviewing all these incidents of, is there anything, and I'll do this as well personally, is there anything I can take away from them that would have made things worse somehow if this was in the pipeline reorder? But I'm pretty sure it should be fine. The big thing with the pipeline reorder, once again, thinking about incidents, is that the goal is to have staging and production basically almost one-to-one. Whatever the one does, the other one needs to do also. So that's probably the biggest takeaway and consideration. If you roll back production, you probably need to roll back staging and vice versa. Whereas before it didn't really matter as much, like we could roll back production and then we just start again and go through staging. Now, to really accurately test mixed deployments on the versions we should be testing, production and staging need to stay as one. So that's probably the trickiest part of this whole migration, is just making sure you keep those two a lot more in sync. They're actually a lot more tightly coupled now, whereas before they weren't as much.
I have one question. Why do we have a baking time and staging too after staging canary?
So to be clear, so we go staging canary, staging canary, production canary, baking time for that production canary. Then after the baking time is done, then we do staging and production with like a 10-minute kind of skew just to catch any deployment problems, if that makes sense. So still the baking time for production canary, but there is no baking time necessarily for staging canary.
So from after staging canary QA finished, we will automatically go over to staging.
Production canary. Yeah, okay. This is the key. It's not so, mentally before we're like, staging canary, production canary, production. It's like, it was a very clean, simple model. I'd argue we're kind of misusing the term staging canary. Like, it's not really a staging canary. We're kind of starting. It is in how we've set it up in the GitLab.
Well,
sense.
I think maybe a way to think about it is canaries first.
Yeah.
So both canaries go first. And then it's always staging production, but we do canaries, then we do mains. So staging canary, production canary, staging production.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thank you. Much better way of putting it, but yeah.
So I completely failed to explain this clearly to Sid yesterday. So I've been thinking about this one a little. The diagram that we have on that epic does a really good job of like showing kind of the new reorder.
And that's why failures in staging canary now are critical, because that is the only line of testing we have before something goes to production canary and customers. So it's kind of, this isn't entirely true, but I would sort of consider the importance flipped on its head. Before it was like staging canary was new and we did have good, we've got, tests on it, but it was probably, and it is blocking. But there was a lot of focus in staging, right? The confidence was in staging. We need to flip that on its head, right? We really need to be confident in staging canary, because after that is production canary, and then staging and production happen after that. So yeah, it's really that the two canaries are very, very important now as our front line, and then the main part follow. but everything is blocking. So at the end of the day, staging canary fails. It's not like you can force, like, I don't even think we can force it through. Like at the end of the day, you know, everything is blocking now besides staging ref, which is fine. And that should be, so, you know, we all should always treat every failure as a blocker.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Graham. Great. So not necessarily one to discuss unless anyone has read and already wants to add comments, but on C, I just wanted to highlight that I have merged in the first iteration of our strategy for this year. I got a few extra details in the Slack message, so I posted from there. I will have some additional bits. You'll notice there's a gap around Q2, and there's a couple of things I mentioned on the MR that I've pulled out just so that we can actually think about them, scope them a bit, and then word them to fit back in. So this is not a complete strategy for now, but hopefully gives a little bit of guidance on like, how much do I need to care about solving this thing? You can actually see some of these things do already fit on our strategy for this year. So let me know if you have any, if you think there's any gaps, or if you think like there's anything else we should be bringing in or changing. Like, you know, we could bring in other things and slow, like reduce some of the other stuff. But what I've tried to do is already think through all the suggestions from the platform direction discussion, which we had, where we've kind of already raised these things. So don't feel like you have to change this up. Like, it's just if you would like to, please do let me know. Awesome. Is there any other stuff people want to bring up in the discussion? No? Okay, I should stop the recording.